All right, guys, as part of the 2024 wrap up and 2025 look ahead in movies and TV, we have another segment here, and it is going to be my predictions for the top 10 films in terms of worldwide box office for 2025. I'm going to be giving you my top 10 predictions and some ballpark numbers. I haven't given, I'm not going to go to the dollar or the cent. I'm not going to say, X movie is going to make $725 million and 360 cents. I don't know. Just making up numbers. But I'm not going to go that granular. I generally went in increments of $25 million. So 100 million, 150 million, 175 million, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how I was structuring this list. And basically what I did was I went on a website and I looked at every single film that was coming out in 2025, at least according to this website's release calendar. And I wrote down every single movie that I thought had a chance to make over $100 million, wrote down the rough estimate, again, in terms of the ballpark of, within the $25 million range. And then I also, then I took that and basically was able to extrapolate a top 10 list out of that. So we are going to go through, I'm going to go through, because I came up with 35 films, which seems like a lot, doesn't it? I don't know. Maybe it's not. I haven't looked into how many movies in 2023 or 2024 have made $100 million at least, but 35 seems like a lot. And maybe I'm just way overestimating some of these films. I'm sure some of these films are not going to make $100 million. I'm sure some films that I haven't listed here will make $100 million. But these are the films that I think will be up there. And so I'm going to run through 35 through 11 really quickly. We're not going to spend too much time, even the pictures. I'm not going to put pictures up for every single one, but just going to run through them really quickly so that it's on YouTube. And when these films do come out, maybe, I was wrong, I was right. But so you guys know my predictions are, in writing, quote unquote, and you can judge it based off of that. So let's start there. And just in terms of rationale, I might give rationale, really quickly for some of these films, but honestly, for the most part, I was just thinking, is it based off of an IP? Is it a sequel? And then just sort of extrapolating, okay, was the previous sequel well received? Is this the second film? Because if it's a second film, generally means the previous film was well received enough that it will get a little bit of a bump from the worldwide, gross of the first film, et cetera, all these different things. So we'll talk through those as well. I'll give like a 2-second, 2-sentence blurb for each one of them as we go along. So starting in at number 35, in the $100 million range, I have Until Dawn, based off a video game, has potential to make some money. Number 34, Mortal Kombat. I'm not even going to read these numbers, actually. I'm just going to go through them from the bottom up. So Mortal Kombat 2, I think, is going to make $100 million based off of an original an IP. It's a sequel, so we'll see about that. Saw 11, $125 million range. I don't know. Do these movies still make money? The previous one still made over $100 million, so we'll see. Love Hurts, the film starring Ke Huy Quan, coming out on February 7th, I think $150 million. I don't know, honestly. Maybe nobody's going to see this film. Maybe everyone's going to see this film. It looks so cheesy and so corny that I honestly have no idea. Nobody 2 is, the Bob Odenkirk movie. The first movie was kind of a sleeper, not a hit, but critically it was well received, and so they're making a sequel, and I think it can make some money, $175 million. The SpongeBob movie, Search for SquarePants, $175 million. I don't know. Kids will probably see this. SpongeBob fans will probably see this. I think even people who are fans of the SpongeBob franchise don't necessarily go out to see these movies all the time, but we'll see. We'll see about that. Predator Badlands, $200 million. I think, based on the really well-received Prey, critically well-received Prey, because that movie came out on, I want to say Hulu, and so, it didn't have a chance at the box office, but it was really well received, and so I have hope that they're going to make another Predator movie that will make some money as well. The Accountant 2, $250 million. The first one, I believe, made about 190, somewhere in that range, 150 to $200 million, and so, this is the Ben Affleck directed, and I think starring film, and so I think that this one can improve upon that because it was so well received. Megan 2.0, $250 million. I think, why not? The first one was kind of a cultural hit and it didn't make too much money, but I think that the second one can make some more money. The Conjuring Last Rites, $250 million. It's the Conjuring franchise. It'll make some money. The Black Phone 2, $250 million. I think the first one made about between $150 to $200 million as well. And I think that because of that, Scott Derrickson was directing it. I believe he's directing the second one as well. And I think that this one can make some money in that range as well. The Bad Guys 2, $275 million. I don't know. The trailers for this look kind of terrible, but it's a kid's movie. It's coming out in August. I don't think anyone else is really releasing a bunch of stuff in August. So yeah, there's that. Paddington in Peru, $300 million. The first two films, I think, made under $300 million. Or I think the first one made about 300 and the second one made 250-ish. So I think the same crowd of people who like the first two films would be showing up to this one. I don't expect that this one's going to attract many new people, to be quite honest with you. Number 22, Now You See Me 3, $325 million. I think that, it's a solid franchise. The franchise makes some money, and I think that this one, as long as it's good, because I think that's the big caveat I have to make here. in terms of these movies is that if these movies are bad, then these predictions go out the window. They might not make any money. If these movies are really good, because I'm just sort of operating under the base assumption that these movies are about the same as their predecessors or movies that are similar to them in their genres. And so, if they're really good or really bad, it can skew it. And I think that Now You See Me 3 is one of those examples. If it's just sort of good in that vein of the first two films, I think it'll make some money for sure. Karate Kid's Legends, $350 million. It's coming out in late May. And yeah, I don't know. It's a kind of an interesting concept of, combining the Ralph Macchio and the Jackie Chan Karate Kid franchises. And so we'll see where we go from there. Five Nights at Freddy's 2, $350 million. The first one, I didn't think it was a very good movie, but it made a lot of money. That franchise has a huge fan base. I used to be a big fan of the lore as well. And I think that they're learning probably from their mistakes. And I'm hoping that this movie is going to be a little bit better. Just a few more, guys. We are almost to the top 10. Tron Ares, $350 million. I think that, the nostalgia for this franchise has kind of worn off, especially with the new generations. But I think that if the film can look cool, it can have that nice retro neon aesthetic, I think it'll be appealing to sci-fi fans as well. From the world of John Wick, Ballerina, I have coming in at about $350 million. I think the John Wick films have been steadily going up, and the last John Wick film, I think John Wick 4 made about $400 million. And so because this is a spinoff, but because also John Wick is appearing and Ana de Armas looks great in the movie and, it has that John Wick feel, I think it'll make in the ballpark of $350 million. A Minecraft movie, $400 million. I think even if this movie is terrible, it still has enough kids who will want to go and see it that $400 million feels somewhat realistic. If it's good, this movie could make $600, $700, $800 million. But if it's as bad as I think it is, $400 million. Number 16 is an odd one. You might say it's an odd one, but The Passion of the Christ Resurrection Part 1. Guys, the first Passion of the Christ made almost $600 million. Now, I think there are some mitigating factors going on here. Number one being, who asked for a sequel to The Passion of the Christ? But Mel Gibson apparently is going to make this, and apparently it's a part 1 of the sequel, so I don't know, kind of weird. But I think lest we forget, the first movie was one of the highest grossing R-rated films of all time. I could see this movie going in any direction. I could see it making even more money, but I could also see it making substantially less, and so I don't know. I put it here because I just think it's a bad bet to bet against a movie that was so historic in terms of box office. The first film making, again, almost $600 million, I believe. And I think it's just a bad bet to say, oh, but nobody cares, so this movie's going to make $50 million. I don't think that that's true. But I also am just hesitant to say that this movie is going to make a ton of money, in terms of like 800 million or whatever. I don't know. It's been a while since the first movie, so we'll see about that. Mickey 17, $425 million. I know Parasite itself didn't make too much money in the worldwide box office, but because it won every single Oscar, and because people seem to know, at least in the trailers, they're putting Bong Joon-ho's name in all the trailers, and Robert Pattinson's there. This is more in the Snowpiercer vein, I suppose, because it's not a Korean film. It's more of just an international film, and it looks really good. So I think I have high hopes, maybe higher hopes than most people for this movie in terms of box office, but I think it can make quite a bit of money. Disney's Snow White, $450 million. I don't know. Little Mermaid made about $550 to $600 million, and that movie was not incredibly well received, but it was liked. And other movies like Aladdin have made $1 billion, but Cinderella made something like $500 million. And I think that Snow White is one of the Disney princesses that people have not been clamoring for a remake, and I don't think the trailers look particularly good. I think Rachel Zegler is, she can sing like nobody else, but I'm a little hesitant to put this one much higher than that. Elio, $450 million. If this movie is good, I can see it falling into the Elemental range, which made about $500 million. So we'll see. I think because it's an unknown IP, it's not an Inside Out 2, for example, that I think it'll probably fall under $500 million, but I think it can be pretty solid. Lilo and Stitch, $500 million. I suspect this movie's going to be big. I think $500 million might even be conservative, honestly, but we'll see about that. And the final film to not make the top 10 is How to Train Your Dragon, the live action film, and I have it coming in at $550 million. The first 3 films, the animated films, actually did not make a ton of money. Just relatively speaking, they didn't make above $500 million, I believe. But this movie, I think, is coming off the nostalgia of those films, and I think it looks really good. And so I have it coming in at $550 million. Okay, I know that was a lot, but I wanted to put that out there just so you guys understand the process and so I can have those films also on the record as well. But now we are finally starting the top 10. These are the top 10 films, I believe, in terms of worldwide international gross. I really hope I didn't forget a movie because that would be very embarrassing, but I have these top 10 films in terms of worldwide grossing, international gross in 2025. And I'm going to give a little bit more of an in-depth explanation as we start out here. So coming in at number 10, we have Superman, and I have it at $600 million, coming out on July 11th, 2025. This movie is interesting to me, though, because I think this movie has one of the highest variances of any of the films on this list, honestly. I think it's very possible that this film could make something like $350 to $400 million because of the bad taste that the DCEU, has left in the mouths of people. I mean, if you look at 2023, right, the 4 DCEU films that came out, Shazam 2, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, they didn't make any money. And I know that none of those films are Superman, but even Man of Steel didn't make. It made something like $500 to $600 million, which was really solid. And it was a solid, movie in terms of reception. But, it didn't make $1 billion immediately. And even The Batman, which was a great movie, didn't make $1 billion. So these aren't guaranteed $1 billion films, right? And I think the DCEU, the sting of that, I don't think has completely washed out. But I think if Superman is good, then you start making Superman 2s and you start making, Brave and the Bold and whatnot. And I think you have yourself a formula for success here. But I'm going to put it, I don't know if I want to say conservatively, but I'm just going to put it here at $600 million because I think there's really a range of plus or minus $200 million in here. So we'll see where we go from here. But number 10 is Superman. Number 9 is Captain America Brave New World, coming out on February 14th, 2025. And I have it coming in at $650 million. I think that, there's been a lot of speculation around this film in terms of reshoots and troubled production and whatnot. I just can't get around the fact, though, that the trailers have been presenting a film that looks really solid. And this film could end up being a disaster if the reports are true. I'm hoping it's not. I'm hoping it's really good. And again, I mean, the reports around Rogue One were that it was a disastrous production. And it was just a great movie. And so I have hope for Captain America Brave New World. They've been tinkering. And it just, I don't know. I don't take the reports of bad test screenings too seriously because, I mean, who would know? They sign NDAs, right? How would you know? So I'm hoping that this is going to be a solid film. Even at the height, though, even if this film comes out and it's something like a 90% Rotten Tomatoes, I still don't think it has the ceiling of, other Captain America films, right? I think even Captain America Winter Soldier made somewhere in the range of, I'm forgetting now, maybe, was it like $600 million? Maybe? I can look it up later. But, I think that because people are not accustomed to Sam Wilson as Captain America as well, rightly or wrongly, that's a topic of conversation for another day. But I think that's a factor as well. And I think that this film probably has a ceiling around the $750 million range. And that's if it's really good and it's really well received. But I think I can feel pretty good just, even the poorly received MCU films like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And I'm talking about films that have recognizable characters, right? But Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, makes almost $500 million, right? And I think that was a poorly received film. The Marvels, I think, had other problems going for it that kind of tanked its box office. But again, I think that Marvel films, I think Captain America is a recognizable IP. And so $650 million feels somewhat reasonable to me. Coming in at number 8 is the next MCU film on this list, The Fantastic Four: First Steps. I have it coming in at $700 million. Now, the reason it's higher than Captain America Brave New World, because I think that the ceiling for Fantastic Four: First Steps is about the same as Captain America Brave New World, but I think the Fantastic Four: First Steps has a chance to reach that ceiling much more than Captain America Brave New World does. I think actually Captain America Brave New World ceiling is probably a little higher, maybe the $800 million range, because it's Captain America and people recognize, Sam Wilson and whatnot. Fantastic Four being new characters, new IP, or not new IP, but new characters in the MCU, and the fact that the previous films were really not well received in the previous iterations, I think actually, might even push the film down, the film ceiling down. But I think, again, Matt Shakman looks like he's crafting an incredible film. The cast is fantastic. Vanessa Kirby, Pedro Pascal, Eben Moss-Baccarat, and Joseph Quinn, look great. Ralph Ineson and Julia Garner, I believe, playing Galactus and Silver Surfer. Robert Downey Jr. might show up. So I think this film has the potential to be one of the best MCU films. And because of that, I think it can really hit that ceiling. But, fingers crossed. And coming at number 7 is the third MCU film. I think that all 3 MCU films are actually going to top out around the same. I have Thunderbolts coming in at about $725 million. I think that Thunderbolts might have the biggest crowd appeal. I still suspect that, Fantastic Four: First Steps is going to be a better movie in terms of critical reception and even my own reception, but I think Thunderbolts is going to have the biggest appeal. So that Thunderbolts doesn't need to be, this 95% critically, certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes kind of film. It can be in the 80% kind of range, but if it's good, and it has that sort of, yeah, this is a fun summer movie. I think that this film is the one that can take off because people love Florence Pugh. David Harbour is great. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, right? All these other characters that you might want to get to know as well. Kicking off the summer, it has the prime real estate in terms of summer, by the way. It is that slot that usually goes to Avengers films. And so it went to Guardians of the Galaxy last time. And I think that that's important because it shows that there's confidence in this movie. And so I have this movie actually making the most money out of the 3 MCU films. But again, not by much. I could totally see any of these 3 films flipping orders and whatnot. So we'll see about that. So those are, that's number 7. And those are the 3 MCU films coming out in 2025. Coming in at number 6 is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, coming out in May 23rd, 2025, and I think it'll make $750 million. Now, the last Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, or now Dead Reckoning, came out in 2023, and it did very well critically. In fact, it was one of my favorite theater experiences I've had in a long time. It was awesome, but it didn't make a lot of money, surprisingly. I think it, and I, this is all relative, but relatively speaking, it didn't make a whole lot of money. It was somewhere under the $600 million range. But what's interesting about that is that the previous 2 films, Mission Impossible Fallout and Rogue Nation, made somewhere in the range of $600 to $800 million. Like, they were much higher, in fact, in the $700 million range. And because this is the final one, maybe it was the part 1 in the title, who knows? Who knows, all sorts of factors. But these movies are great. They do well. And I think that because this is the final one, I can see it topping out at the higher end of these Mission Impossible films. I have it coming in at $750 million, in that range, by the way. Because like I said, I want to reiterate, I'm not saying it's going to make exactly $750 million. I'm just saying within the $25 million range-ish, I think it's going to come in at $750 million. Coming in at number 5 is Michael. And for those of you who don't know Michael, it's the Michael Jackson biopic. And I think everyone who's listening to this podcast, has a reaction when they hear the name Michael Jackson. A lot of positive emotions for sure because of the music and the cultural phenomenon, but also a lot of negative emotions as well. From all accounts, this film looks incredible. The actor is his nephew, and from all accounts, again, it looks like he is incredible in this movie. And here's the interesting thing about these musical biopics as well. Some of them do incredibly well box office wise. In fact, Bohemian Rhapsody almost made $1 billion. It made $910 million. Other films like Elvis and Rocketman don't do that well and make somewhere in the range of $100 to $200 million. I was thinking about those movies as I was putting this list together, and I think that the Michael Jackson biopic falls in the range more of the Bohemian Rhapsody. Michael Jackson, because you think about, Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen, right? Queen is just such a big part of the zeitgeist of just Western society. And I think that Michael Jackson is even more so. On top of the fact you add, people who are probably curious to see how they handle the personal allegations behind a lot of the things that Michael Jackson did in his personal life. And I think that this movie could make a lot of money, especially if it's one of those Oscar contender films as well. Now, some people are even saying it can make $1 billion. I don't personally see that, honestly. If Bohemian Rhapsody couldn't make $1 billion, I don't know if this one can, honestly, because musical biopics just seem to have a ceiling as well. But I do think $800 million feels very solid for me, and I think that this movie could be huge. This movie could be huge. So Michael is coming in at number 5. The next 4 films, and if you want to play along, you can go on the release calendar and see what 4 movies you think are left, because these 4 movies, I'm going to tell you right now, I think are all going to make $1 billion. So I have 4 films in 2025 making upwards of $1 billion. Coming in at number 4 is Jurassic World Rebirth, coming in at $1.125 billion, coming out in July of 2025. The Jurassic World films are somehow, I'm not going to say immune. They're not immune to the critical reception, but it's pretty darn close, because Jurassic World Dominion was panned. People didn't like it. Fallen Kingdom was pretty much panned, and people didn't like it. I didn't like those 2 films at all. I watched them, and so did everyone else, because Jurassic World Dominion, which I think is probably one of the worst Jurassic, films that I've seen in a while, made $1 billion. So you have that, right? People just want to see Jurassic World. We had a little bit of a break. I think Jurassic World Dominion came out in 2021, I want to say. So a little bit of a break here, maybe 4 or 5 years. But on top of that, this movie looks much better than the previous Jurassic World films. Like the cast of Mahershala Ali and Scarlett Johansson, that's really interesting as well. Like 2 of the best actors working in Hollywood today, I think is a good sign, at least. And so I just can't imagine that this film isn't going to make under $1 billion. I think that even if it's bad, it's different, right? It's not the Chris Pratt, because I think if they made another Jurassic World film that was also bad with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, people would be like, kind of over it. And I think that movie would still have made $850 million. But I think you're going to see Jurassic World trailers come out. People are going to be like, oh, it's a different cast and dinosaurs, and it looks good. And I think people are just going to go out and see it. It's also coming out in prime time. It's coming out beginning of July 2025, and I think it's going to make so much money. So Jurassic World Rebirth coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3 is Zootopia 2, coming in at $1.25 billion, and it's coming out Thanksgiving of 2025. The first Zootopia film made $1 billion. The second movie, it's going to make $1 billion. The question is how big, and honestly, I don't know, but I'm going to put it up here because I think that the two films above it are just safely, I think much more safely going to make way more money than Zootopia, but I think Zootopia 2 is just going to make a lot of money, and I think that we should be ready for that. So, Zootopia 2. Coming in at number 2, Wicked Part 2. I might be crazy here because as I'm recording this well in advance because I will be gone as these videos come out. I'll be away for a little bit, and so I wanted to record these ahead of time. So, I don't have final numbers for Wicked Part 1, unfortunately, but even if Wicked Part 1 doesn't make $1 billion, it is being so well received, and I think it's going to win a lot of Oscars. I think Cynthia Erivo might even win an Oscar. Who knows? But it'll win set designs, costume design Oscars and whatnot. And it'll probably be nominated for Best Picture as well. And I think that no matter what, that is a recipe for success for the second part. I am so looking forward to the second part. I think it's one of my most anticipated films of 2025. And I have it coming in at $1.5 billion with a B, billion dollars. And it's coming out around Thanksgiving of 2025. But the number one film, and if you looked at the release calendar, it should be no surprise to you, is Avatar: Fire and Ash, coming in at $2.05 billion. I think, here's the thing with the Avatar franchise. Until proven otherwise, I'm going to put it at the $2 billion mark. But I also have been noticing that, obviously, with these two films, the first and the second one, there's a decline, right? I mean, the first film made almost $3 billion. Crazy. The second film made something like $2.3 billion. I think that this third film is going to make just over $2 billion, but you start talking about the fourth film. Even if this third film is well received, I think you're going to start to get, a little less diminishing returns every single time coming out here. And I wonder what that's going to do, for the sequels coming out. We'll see. But, maybe the third film is so well received that the fourth film makes like $3 billion and it just crushes every record. But until proven otherwise, I'm going to put Avatar: Fire and Ash at the top of this list. So guys, those are my top 10 box office predictions for 2025, the top 10 grossing films of the year. We'll see. This video is going to be up all year, obviously, and I'm probably going to get a lot of these wrong because I also have, the other 11 through 35 up here as well. So I have 35 chances to be very wrong here. I'm hoping to be in the ballpark of maybe within $50 million of all of these, but, I'm probably going to be I might even get 5. And if I get 5 within a very close range, I'd be pretty happy about that. So let me know in the comments, what do you think will be the top 10 grossing box office films of 2025? Let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear your rationale as well. So let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below.